to carry out a survey.
Mm-hmm.
What are my first set of considerations? What do I need to bear in mind initially to start off with?
As in any research method and problem, one begins the method with understanding clearly what questions you're trying to answer, what the goals of your research are, what the key ideas are in carrying out a research study. And so if you know what you're searching for, what you're trying to answer, then it becomes easier to either select a survey or to design a survey. The second thing that really matters is who you're going to survey, because surveys require reading ability. Clearly, the age and language of the readers matters immensely to the survey you're going to select. What works with university students simply won't work with primary school students. What you might get away with for teachers, you wouldn't get away with general adults in the population. Something in English might just not work with Cantonese speakers. So there are issues of who are you surveying and what do you really want to know.
And is the size of the population an important issue?
Size matters because this is quantitative research, and the goal of a survey is to come up with inferences from a sample that generalize to the population. And fortunately there are websites where you can go online and calculate, given the size of the population, how many people do I need in my survey to get a robust result. But generally, under 100 is going to be very unreliable. Anything over 500 is probably going to be very reliable and stable in its estimation. Generally, if the population is over 20,000 people, you probably only need 400 people.
So I've clarified my topic. Do I just go ahead and develop a survey, or are there ways that I should approach this?
Developing a survey is not a simple and easy task, even though I suspect a lot of market research houses just churn them out like that. A good survey requires a clear understanding of the domain that you're surveying and having written enough prompts to be able to elicit a response from a population that you can say, when people see these questions, they always connect it to this basic idea. And that's a considerable amount of work. So in the first instance, it makes much more sense to stand on the shoulders of previous researchers and to search the literature for an extant survey that's close to your topic and that has been already developed and used, trialed, analyzed, and evaluated by peers and published in the research literature close to your topic. And if you can find that kind of instrument and it's close to your topic and close to your population, it's much easier to adapt it than to start from a blank piece of paper.
That sounds an attractive idea. So where should I start to look for an existing survey?
Well, the library is a great place to begin because the library has a cataloging system and search tools that allow you to get into the research literature using the key terms that you developed for your research questions to, if appended with the key notion of survey, and you can search the literature and find research articles that have been published with surveys that provide copies of the survey instrument with it, along with statistical analysis of the survey results that could give you credibility that this instrument has robust what we call psychometric properties in terms of statistical and validity concerns that you could just adopt and adapt. Alternately, there are online search tools. Google Scholar would be a good start. The Educational Testing Service has a test locator service that would include survey instruments, especially around educational topics. The Mental Measurements Yearbook and the Book of Experimental Unpublished mental measurements. There are a number of books that you can get that collect together test instruments, not just of knowledge, but of attitudes and opinions and beliefs that you can use to survey students and adults. And they would be places to look using the right search questions.
You mentioned adapting.
Mm-hmm.
What would I need to adapt? What would I need to think about?
Well, it's hardly likely that somebody has done exactly the research you want to do with exactly the same population that you're intending to survey. That means they might have developed a survey that's relevant to your question, but they haven't used it in your population. An American survey in New Zealand, we want to change the spelling to make sure it fits our context. Some of the expressions, like free lunch, might not be used in our context, and so we would need to change some of the wording to fit our context. And you may find that the survey as a whole is close, and that there's scale 1 or factor 2 that doesn't quite really fit your needs, so you might want to drop that. Alternately, you might have to translate it. If you're going to do research in Hong Kong, the odds are you'll have to do it in Cantonese, and maybe most of the research in the area you're interested in has been done in English, and so you'll need to somehow get it from English into Cantonese. And so there's various procedures to make sure that the survey instrument truly fits your questions and your population.
So if I'm doing a translation, I could take it to, say, the Google translation software, and I just run it through that, and then I have a Chinese version. Is that good enough?
I suppose there are, if it's very simple language, maybe, but I wouldn't want to put my hand on my heart and swear that it was okay. And if it's complex language, the odds are that a word-for-word translation will end up with problems. The gold standard in translation is not a literal translation, but a functionally equivalent translation. That is, it has the same meaning even if it doesn't have the same words. Consider in English, there are many ways to ask one question. How old are you? What is your age? These are not literal translations of each other, but they are functionally equivalent. So when we translate from language 1 to language 2, we are left with many choices about which words to use in language 2 that convey the same meaning as the words that were chosen in language 1 to convey a certain meaning. So it's, in a sense, requires the translator adapter to look at the intent and the meaning of the question, not its words, and then translate the meaning rather than word for word. Now, once you've done that, it's one way to check it is to give it to a competent bilingual person and say, translate it back to the original language. Now, you know it's not going to be identical. So the translate back translate procedure works on the assumption that the words should be the same when they come back out of the translated language. But we know that functionally equivalent are not going to be the same. So translate back translate may not give us the assurance that they mean the same thing. An example that we developed an instrument recently here in Hong Kong, translating from English into Cantonese and Putonghua. So we had a 3-version questionnaire. And a group of us debated the meaning of the words. And, for example, the word in assessment becomes pengu in Cantonese, but it's a slightly different word in Putonghua, which translates as evaluation. And so the Putonghua person would say, can we say it this way? And the Cantonese would say, yes, we could say it that way, but that would change the English. Gavin, can we say it that way in English? And we negotiated that meaning together to get a statement that had the same meaning. What we did next is we went to a population, we went to a class of students who were fluent in English and Chinese, and we gave them the English version and the Chinese version together and said, read those and score how similar they are. And items that got low scores of similarity were the ones we went back and we analyzed, why do they think it's not the same? And sometimes we had to change the English, and sometimes we changed the Chinese. But you need procedures to look for, do they have the same meaning, not do they have the same words?
Okay. Now, one of my colleagues said I should carry out a pilot.
Yeah.
Is that an essential step?
Certainly for a questionnaire that you develop yourself, you need to know that people from the population you're interested in understand it the same way you intended it. So if you're creating a questionnaire and you want to work with P6 students, you want a sample of P6 students to read it and highlight words they don't understand, explain to you what they think that the questionnaire items mean, for you to be sure that people at that age understand it the same way that you as a group of adults understood it. If you've got a questionnaire that you've adopted from another source and it was used with students of the same age or people of the same age, and the adaptation was relatively trivial, and you think that there is good reason to believe that the previous sample is like your sample, I'd be pretty much tempted to just go straight into collect the data from a large sample.
Now, if I'm going to collect the data from a large sample, I've got to look at the printing costs, the postage costs for posting out, and probably the stamp for them to return.
Yes.
Cost of the envelopes, and all these. And I'm just researching on my own. I have to fund this out of my own pocket. Is there any way I can get around this?
And one of the things you've forgotten is you need to include the cost of data entry and data checking that it was entered correctly.
Right.
There are ways around it. With the internet now, it's possible for a very low cost to put your survey online at SurveyMonkey or half a dozen other survey instruments. Google Documents has a survey tool. Now that works fine if people are computerate and if they're willing to do this online. I would probably think people over the age of 40 or under the age of 10, you're probably better off with paper. But maybe if you're dealing with high school and university students, online might be a lot better, especially if you can plug into a social networking space that these people tend to hang out in and say, hey, come and do this interesting survey. The goal in getting people to do your survey is not how much space it takes or even how much time it takes, but how interesting it is to them, how salient it is to their lives, and what they're going to get out of doing it. So if you can give them rapid feedback, here's how your scores compare to someone else's, people like that. That's one of the incentives to doing these online IQ tests. You get feedback. If they go into a lottery that they might win a prize, $100 at Cafe de Coral or something, then that might motivate them. So you need to make it interesting and attractive to people to do it, whether they're going to do it on paper or online. But bottom line, if you get more than 50% of the people actually doing the survey, you're doing really well. In education research now, as low as 1/3, that's pretty normal. Under 1/3, you'd be disappointed, and over 1/2, you should be excited.